Welcome to Stock Therapy with PennyQueen. This is our inaugural episode, and today we are privileged to have CEO Jay Hutton with Visibility Group. Welcome to the program, Jay.
Thank you, Penny. I love that name, Stock Therapy.
Well, stocks are definitely my happy place. Red or green day, they're very calming in my world.
Wow, that's interesting. Not everybody's world functions that way.
It could be a personality problem, but so I guess the purpose of this interview is actually for current shareholders already. There's a lot of material already out there about what visibility is. So I'm going to try and hit the primary questions that have been sent to me from other shareholders. And the first thing I want to do is really just clear the air. First question, are you planning on doing a private placement anytime soon?
No, we don't need to. Actually, before we started here, I pulled up some of the metrics, and I'll just blow into them right now if you want, because people want to know, and I am aware of that. There are 30 million warrants currently at 0.17, 17 cents, with a cash value of an additional 5.1 million that have yet to come into the company, and they have till 2023 to come into the company. They're already, as you can see, considerably in the money. That's sort of metric one that people have been asking me about, so it's important that I address that. There's an additional just under 1 million warrants outstanding at 0.60, 60 cents, with an additional cash value of about 600,000 that could come into the company. Those warrants expire by the end of February. Debentures, because there's a debt component. Well, there's an ongoing debate about whether debentures ought to be considered debt or common shares, but let's for the time being call it a debenture. There's just under $500,000 that have yet to convert, and that's great news for the company because last year at this time that number was north of 5 million. So basically the company is essentially debt free, because I don't consider that to be a material amount, at least not based upon other metrics in the company. And I guess the most important one that people have been asking me, just over the last 6 months, $7.2 million of cash is coming to the company by virtue of the exercise of warrants. So that's the backdrop. And then we now answer the question, which should be patently obvious to anybody who have that information. We don't need to finance. And because we don't need to finance, it gives me an ability to be, even though I'm a CEO that cares deeply about the interests of the shareholders, because I am one, a big one, I don't have to worry about the day-to-day stock price. I am worried about it because I get that sentiment and people want me to explain what the heck's going on. But from an investor point of view, as opposed to a trading point of view, do your due diligence, see if this company can get where it's going to go. Do you trust management? Do you understand the marketplace? I often say that we're inflecting in markets that are inflecting. And that's, I mean, it's not difficult to understand, but you have to sort of take an investor approach. Do you believe it over the long term? And if you do believe it over the long term, then this transient bump, even though I know we all feel it, me included, it's transient, right? So I think it's connected to macro markets. It's connected to some of the unregulated naked shorts that are allowed to occur in Canada, and every small cap CEO will complain about that. And if things go well, there'll be some level of regulation happening this year to address that, because it is a problem and it is not investor friendly. And because of that, I think these regulators are beginning to take notice. There's been more and more chatter about it lately. I'm sorry, Penny, long answer to a short question, but that's the answer.
No, there wasn't anything you said that I didn't agree with. So, but a lot of people, yesterday had some pretty negative price action, so did the day before, and I know a lot of people were concerned about it. I personally take a longer look, and I consider that to be an absolute gift, and it looks like we're recovering. So let's see, my next question is, can you give us a little more information about Tim Huckabee's departure?
Sure. I mean, organizations, any company, and this is, I've been through a few. They're an organism, and sometimes founders aren't the people that can execute to get to a certain level, and you have to transition people during the process, and including me. At some point in time, I'll become incapable of taking the company to the next level. And, at some point in time, I have my own suspicions on when that time is. It's not immediately soon here, but eventually you kind of have to graduate. And I'm not suggesting Tim's departure was an upgrade, was a need brought about by the need to upgrade. But he wanted to move on to other things, and it was not acrimonious. It was very cooperative. He doesn't have a chip on his shoulder. He's not looking to do something negative or damaging to the company. He's a long-term believer, true believer, and there's a mechanism in place where all of his original shares, north of 6.5 million shares, are in a mechanism where they're not sold. So we're going to review that on a regular basis, but because he's not desperate to exit, doesn't need to exit, doesn't have personal crises on his hands, he's not going through a divorce. We're talking about just a natural, appropriate transition that occurs at every part of the company. I know that it's significantly more interesting or relevant when it's a founder. And because of that, I think that there's a need for me to address it. But bringing in Gary Gibson is a great transition. It's not necessarily an upgrade because Tim is extremely well known, particularly in the Microsoft ecosystem, published and well regarded. But Gary Gibson is no slouch. He's a computer vision expert. He has 12 patents. He was an academic for a lot of years, and we pulled him out of academia. And he does understand small companies, the need and the different friction and issues within a small company. So, like I said, not acrimonious, cooperative. There's not a bunch of free trading shares that are going to hit the marketplace, which is what a lot of investors care about, because he's a long-term believer. We started this thing together. We have some specific objectives in terms of market cap. We have some targets with respect to market cap, so he's not looking to get out anytime soon. But as I said, we'll regularly review that mechanism, and cooperatively with him, we'll figure out when that's going to change.
Perfect. Thank you. And you answered my next question about, Gary Gibson. What does he bring to visibility? Anything else you want to add there? I think you pretty well covered it. But
well, we're in R&D this year, we'll be doubling our investment over 2021. And because we have enormous revenue projects, which stress that end of the organization, we have to do more. For example, I have to speak a little bit stealthily at the moment. We have 2 additional projects with Anheuser-Busch that we're right now scoping and planning to begin. And because of that, Gary Gibson has the unique talent of raising and mentoring and guiding a team. And because we're doing more of that, again, connected directly to revenue projects, not science for the benefit of science, because he's got that unique ability, he was very attractive. We hired a search firm. We spent 4 months to find the right person. We spent the money necessary to find the right talent. We didn't try and sort of do it ourselves, with a LinkedIn or garage.net search. We did the proper approach, and we're delighted to bring him on. Actually, he's been surprising to me. I've been through a lot of chief technology. Well, I shouldn't say I've been through them. I've it's not like I rotate them because I'm so difficult to work for. That's important to say. But I know a lot of that ilk of personality, and he's unique because he has business skills beside his really superior technical skills. And that's a unicorn. That's difficult to find. And I've been delighted and surprised. He's helped us with contract negotiations. He's helped us with some of the various intellectual property pursuits that we're engaged in at the moment. I didn't expect those things, and I'm delighted to get more value than I had expected.
Excellent. All right, this is probably the hardest question for a CEO, and often one that they're unwilling to answer. So I want you to give it your best shot. What is visibility worth?
Well, we're right now about 165 million Canadian.
Okay, fair enough. What do you feel the true value is of visibility? I mean, we've got a 10% stake in AustinGIS, 30% stake in RadarUSA, and then the Wrinkle Media, the AB and Bev. That's huge.
And I think poorly understood by the market. That's, for me, that's not a criticism. It's probably more a criticism of my inability to properly and clearly explain those pieces. In the most recent investor deck, which will probably go live in the next couple of weeks, we take the time to talk about each of these sort of out of the box initiatives because people don't understand it. This is not a balance sheet assessment of value because there's some off balance sheets component to what we're doing, right? So we've said internally that we believe that upon execution of our major projects, that our market cap should exceed $1 billion. And that's not hyperbole, even though you hear that probably 1,000 times a week from small cap CEOs that are up and to the right. This is where we're going, up and to the right. But in reality, if we properly execute on the projects that we have visible to us right now, and if we did not add to those projects, we have a very realistic opportunity to get to that number. So on each of those initiatives, AustinGIS, a 10% carried interest. I can't talk too much in detail because that's a private company that have elected to be stealth for now. And they can't have some board member who's also a cowboy talking about what they're doing and how they're doing it. Well, we went through some initial first quarter metrics. Really, the first full operating quarter of AustinGIS was the fourth quarter of 21. Astounding, really. And when the time comes for them to share the majority hold partner, which there's a bunch of speculation on who that is, then I imagine they'll share their financial metrics or some level of the financial metrics, if not contract metrics. And people, our shareholders, will fully appreciate why we put $1 million in. Because in addition to that $1 million, we're doing a bunch of things for them in terms of how we're combining our sales efforts and engaging together on large opportunities. Remember the bar for AGIS, which I think is a messaging that you saw. Their principal focus is deals 200 million and bigger. And even though there's a range of solutions, 3 or 4 of those solutions have visibility at the core with a right of first refusal on other computer vision solutions. So I'm actually really proud of the negotiation we did with that deal because that's a kind of it's an off balance sheet technically growth opportunity that sits outside of the value of visibility as a core, right? So that's AustinGIS. RadarUSA, we will receive the revenue from that, a $2 million prepaid license. It'll happen in the first half of this year. That's progressing nicely. In fact, RadarUSA already has contracts underway with various security-based solutions here in the US. We're a 30% carried interest in that. In addition to that, we'll have the license revenue that I just mentioned. So that's, again, an item that we're projecting and forecasting in our pro forma, but we don't necessarily talk about what that business is doing independently. We will begin to do so as that secures traction. I function as the executive chairman of that company. So I do have visibility to what they're doing. So that, again, is an off-balance sheet or pseudo off-balance sheet opportunity for us to grow incrementally beyond the core visibility value prop. And then the third one, which I've talked about, is Wrinkle Media. Just speaking about 4 years in the future, which is a 45 to 50,000 store count objective, that sits in the neighborhood of $10 million a year in revenue, just in the license side, which happens outside of the joint venture, like direct to visibility. And then inside the joint venture, when you build that kind of media network, and as a quick aside, part of the risk of that deal was when we build the media network, we Wrinkle, Anheuser-Busch visibility. Is that media network worth what we think it's worth? What can we sell it for what we think we can sell it for? And because we now have 4 or 5 months behind us and a sizable network to tangibly sell, it's not 100 stores, it's not 200 stores, it's sizable. What we're learning is that we nailed it, that we got the right price point. And that wasn't me, that was the experts in the region that were doing that and trying to evaluate the value of that media. So significant permanent buys on that network are happening now, which help us fortify the second half of our value, which is from the media side. 30%, you know, if we sell 100% inventory by year 4, that's 250 to 280 million gross, and we have 30% of that. So those are 3 things that don't show up in our core investor relations deck because they sort of sit as outliers to our core business. But in many ways, each of them are independently valuable to visibility and can be assigned a specific value. And part of my messaging is I'm going to spend a little bit more time doing that more aggressively and more directly, because it's an important piece for investors. We all made that investment in AGIS as an example. We've all made that investment in Wrinkle, both in cash and in time and effort, more importantly in time and effort. So my investors, visibility investors, need to know how that's doing.
Perfect. And just to verify, the Wrinkle Media, that's about in the 85% margin range.
Oh, media is like software.
So,
yeah. So it's 85 to 95. The only thing that comes off media is media commissions.
okay,
So
perfect.
it can be 3%, right? So you know, it varies, but it is akin to software as a service revenue. It's recurring, so it's got that gift, and it's high margin, so it's got that as well.
All right. Well, I fully support you making this more clear to other investors what those off-book values really mean. But I do have to say I don't really make money on buying investments that are already fairly valued. So yeah, go ahead now.
Yeah.
So what's your monthly burn rate?
So burn has 2 components. This is the cost and the revenue. And if I was just to express the cost, what we're actually spending on a month-to-month basis, it's between $400 and $500 USD. But because revenue is now climbing, it will in the first quarter drop to 300 net burn, 200 net burn, 100 net burn, and then we pivot over to the other side as that revenue climbs. If Q4 is any indication, and we're not public with Q4 yet, but as an indication, our burn would have dropped spread over the entire quarter under 250. So we're looking at exactly the kind of inflection that we want to see, right? It's not going to be a straight line. There'll be months where you drop because you've done a bit of investment, and there'll months where you climb. But based upon projections for 2022, which I haven't released yet, will soon, it'll be the year that we turn the corner on profitability.
Perfect. And so you already spoke to your cash positions and warrants being exercised. Do you have anything else to add there?
No,
right.
we feel comfortable that
that's
going to keep us from having to tap the markets again.
Fantastic. And then the existing warrants, does that include the 9% of the company that ABI has option to buy?
Not the ones I just mentioned.
Okay, perfect.
There's an additional, I want to say 18 to 20 million. That number's not directly in my head at the moment, but when they decide to exercise, and there's already been active conversations on that topic, that's a issuance of roughly 18 to 20 million. Now, by the way, just as a quick reminder, they have to meet certain performance milestones to achieve the ability to exercise those warrants. They're not sort of vested until they reach milestones. And so some of those, 2 or 3 of those have been met already. And the next, I think, important milestone is 15,000 stores, which should be met in the year of 2022. So they're anxious to do that. Right now, they're a little less anxious because they're underwater. But as we continue to execute, which I'm certain we will, that'll go back into the money, and now that conversation will be back and active and alive. Interestingly, we don't deal with Mexico when we have the conversations about warrants. We deal with Belgium.
Okay.
So the treasury function happens in Belgium. So it is by design objective and different than the in-country people. So they're more of a balance sheet, you know, what's the delta, what money can we make, how quickly can we sell, do we hold and grow? It's all those conversations, right? And at the moment, we're not anxious to get them to exercise because so much of the value is in front of us.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. All right, so at install rate of 200 stores a month, which I know you hit at one point in December and already in January, what does that add to your bottom line every week?
So it's not 200 stores a month, just to correct you slightly on that. It's 200 stores a week.
Sorry.
This is a really important topic. If I could take a moment or two on it, Penny.
Take them all.
If you look at the retail segment, what you'll see, it's hard for us in US or Canada to think in terms of what's happening in that market. So let me take a moment or two to sort of turn into a shopper marketing geek and just explain a little bit of what's happening. There are two broad segments in retail, especially retail, you know, grocery, dry goods, you know, convenience store retail. There's what they call modern trade, and there's traditional trade. Modern trade is Walmart, Safeway, Target. That's modern trade. And modern trade has embraced technology and is always pretty current in technology. But traditional trade, which is 90% of all trade in Latin America, you could reasonably say Walmart or that segment of the marketplace in the USA does most of the revenue. It's a reasonable thing to say. But in Latin America, it's flipped. 90% of the trade is done in mom and pop's bodega, small stores. 10% is done in modern trade. Now, it's different from market to market. Peru could be 15 and 85. Ecuador could be 80-20. But in general, the majority of the marketplace is done, revenue is done in traditional trade. Traditional trade is mom and pop. Traditional trade is still in 1965 in Latin America. So what we're doing here, we're leapfrogging 40 years, taking traditional trade into the place where they can compete with modern trade in terms of data, advertising, that sort of thing. And when we're able to do this, I mean, I've got Pedro Garavito in the most recent white paper that we published called Store as a Medium, we published with WPP and Intel. He's quoted in there. One of the things he's saying is, we've picked the hardest segment of retail to do. And when we do it, we will have completely revolved traditional trade. What's India? Traditional trade. What's Pakistan and all of Africa? Traditional trade. So it's really fascinating to me that even though we're desperate to build a modern trade business, and we have a modern trade business, what's unique here is if we're able to occupy this niche of traditional trade with significant vendors like AB InBev, iconic 600 brand, you know, well-known vendors, and we're able to crack the code of bringing this technology in traditional trade. I mean, this is an 8 square meter convenience store on the side of a dirt road in Merida, Mexico, right? We can't think. There's nothing like that in the US or Canada. There's nothing like it. So I only bring that up to say, we have suffered some delays because of the process of doing this. You're building a bill of materials, $1,300 worth of equipment for each store, and you're shipping that bill of materials to Mexico, Peru, Colombia, Ecuador. Customs delays, supply chain delays, all the mechanics and logistics of that, which we're overcoming because of the enormous assistance of both Tech Mahindra and Intel. And then we have Tech Mahindra team. We have 15 7-person teams that we had to train up, help them understand how to do this, help them troubleshoot. All that was done in 21. The impact was it started really lethargically because we're back to doing installs and we're training them on the fly. And then when October came around, we started to hit a clip that was good, 100+ stores a week. Our objective is 200 a week. We got there. We've slipped back a couple weeks and then back up to 200. You know, that's the way it is. And so in January, we began to get back to that clip. And the projection for 2022 is to reach between 13 and 15,000 stores. and which was our initial 2-year objective anyway. So I cannot speak in detail because I've been told not to about the store cadence. And let me say why. It's not because I'm ashamed of what we've done, or it's not because I don't owe that information to the shareholders. It's because in this marketplace, Modello is number 2. OXO is number 1. And this is secret sauce. As I said to you before, if we're able to do this with traditional trade, we're changing the landscape of traditional trade. So what Anheuser-Busch doesn't want us to do, and I'm on the board of the joint venture, so I get this in my ear when I go there for meetings. Don't talk about store cadence until we're ready to talk about store cadence, because we don't want to wake up number 1 in the marketplace. If we do wake up number 1 in the marketplace, OXO, then Pepsi's advertising dollars or Coca-Cola advertising dollars now has another place to go. Now, I've described to you the enormous complexity of doing this kind of network, and it is complex. They believe it to be very, very proprietary. And well, there will come a time when we could talk about it, and it will come soon. They're holding me back.
Well, can you speak to what a cadence of 200 stores per week would do to your annual run rate?
Yeah, that's between 800 and 1,000 stores a month. So if you project that over the entire year, it's 12,000. But of course, there's going to be weeks where we'll actually do a little bit more. And that's why we're sitting on a target objective in 23 of 15,000.
Okay, well, here, check this math with me. So if it's $10 to $15 per store for internet as a service, so I'll go ahead and make that $12. Then $450 a month in media, split 3 ways. We're at about $150. That gives each week bringing in an extra $32,000, or about 1.6 million added.
I'm only going to say that we're getting more media dollars than that. We have 20 slots, and we sell those 20 slots for between $45 and $60 per month. And Penny, I'm not going to go deeper into unit level economics because this is precisely what I'm supposed to not do.
Okay.
So, I'm not trying to be flippant. I'm just, you understand, this is incredibly differentiated, and they want that to remain their proprietary as long as possible.
As vague as more is, it's an answer I like even better. So,
okay.
And then, so I've heard you mention the visibilities in 6 countries. So at this point, I have Mexico, Colombia, Peru, Ecuador, and the US.
Well, visibility is in more than 6 countries. I think that what that might have been in reference to is what the Wrinkle Media project is in. And those countries are, and there's a blank space here, just to give you a heads up. Peru, Colombia, Ecuador, Mexico, blank, because those 2 are very strategic to AB InBev, and we'll be able to talk about them, but not yet. One of them's Caribbean side, another one's further down in South America.
Excellent. All right, so sounds like you were EBITDA positive in December. So
on a monthly quarterly basis.
Are you predicting that for Q1 or?
We're currently predicting that the flip from loss to profit in the second half of the year.
Okay. All right, and let's see. So AustinGIS, visibility has 10% stake. Is that portion something that the bigger players have a right to purchase back?
No.
Easy. All right, and can we get a general update on AustinGIS?
Well, they're a private company, so I don't want to go cowboy and start telling their tales, but they will be probably going public about their successes soon, probably in the first quarter, the back end of the first quarter, including will be the majority holder has said to the AustinGIS management team, you can talk about us one time, you have to pick the time. And it'll be probably in the first quarter. I'm not in the room when those conversations are had, but it seems like that's a weird That's a weird thing to ask, but that's what's been asked. They're very delighted with their progress so far. It's the best I can say.
So I know you get harassed a lot about, can you tell me about this? Can you tell me about this? And I'm certainly doing it my fair bit too. But I do have to say, being the, I don't know, being the kid that just got invited to the pool table here in the cafeteria, I get I feel like you're adding all this value that you can't actually, really spell out to shareholders. And for me, and I love disruptive technology and I love undervalued. And I feel like we're just building more and more value. And at that point, when it becomes recognized, I'm going to be very happy, along with a lot of other shareholders. So you let them talk about it when they feel like it.
It's not comfortable for me to be cagey like this, because I, as an investor, just me as a regular consumer investor, I like transparency. But we're in a business, like it or not, that has among its customers people that don't want you to talk about what you're doing with them. And I've mentioned a couple times a sovereign government deal, which has it has been delayed. It was to be done in the fourth quarter. It is now going to be done with zero risk, 100% certainty in the first quarter. And when that's done, I imagine my disclosure will be something like Visibility and its local systems integrator has just secured a deal with the sovereign government, and sort of probably not a whole lot more. I'm going to try and connect that to revenue because I know that's what shareholders want. If I can't connect it to revenue, I'll give a camera count so that all of us can sort of do the reverse math. The regulators get a little bit worried when you start to connect it to revenue. And so probably the path of least resistance is to speak more about camera because I've exposed unit level economics before and people can do the reverse level math. And so that's the nature of what we're gonna face that time and time again, especially in the security realm. It's less of a concern in the retail world, with one possible exception. We have in the fourth quarter 2 very large beverage companies that represented our first 2 orders in the cooler as a service space, the digital cooler, and we're enormously proud of them. But they don't want the marketplace knowing that they're spying on their customers. So in this, and they're really not. I mean, I'm using the language the most negative viewer of this would use. But in the fullness of time, that'll come out, and whether it'll come out in a guerrilla type way, someone sees a cooler somewhere and takes a video of it and posts it somewhere. We've seen a little bit of that already. And right now, even though the order was sizable, it is a fraction of the opportunity in this space. A very large Atlanta-based very large Atlanta-based beverage company, well known, has just in the US 21 million coolers on their balance sheet. 21 million. They give Penny's convenience store a cooler to put their product in, and they'll do the same thing with Walmart at a bigger scale. So all of our hypothesis, mine and the investors of Visibility, should be simply this: what amount of that marketplace will go to media on the cooler? Is it 1% or is it 20%? And already we're in process with scaled pilots, scaled validation with very large beverage companies. So it seems to me that it very much similar to our security hypothesis. On the cooler side, all we have to say is what amount of the installed base, we're not talking net new greenfields markets, we're talking installed. Our digital cooler technology can go onto an existing cooler. So the question will be, how much of that existing cooler base, just in the US alone, will move to digital? And what's the proposition there? Will these beverage companies want to advertise their product and ancillary product on the cooler? I have my own point of view, but investors can make that assessment. And then on the security side, what percentage of dumb cameras will become smart? If all you do is analyze that, and those are fractions of our business proposition, as you know, that should be enough for you to say, well, it's only a matter of time. And we don't need necessarily to be the dominant player. On the cooler side, we have the only technology right now that's able to retrofit. So super excited about that. It's beachhead time. It's go as fast as you can, because I'm in technology. I'm 55 now. I've seen it replicated. You only have this lead for some unknown amount of time. So that's why we're going so quickly. And if you understand who our partners are, think of WestRock, Coca-Cola vendor of the year, the last 3 years running, WestRock, S&P component company. If you look at those type of partners, you know that we're going to have a real good crack at opening up this marketplace.
All right, perfect. Do you have any update on any of your pre-revenue partnerships? Got Sensormatic, News America Marketing, KLA Labs, Connect.
News America Marketing was acquired in, I think, June of last year. Everybody was fired, and they focused on the traditional business, which was FSI, couponing. So everything we were doing with them after 3 years of investment evaporated. And that can happen with acquisitions. We've all seen that. The key people splintered into other parts of the industry and are now sitting in places where they can do additional benefit for us. So I'm not going to talk too much about this because some of them are on the come, but we're going to rebuild what we were planning to do with News America with other companies that really have, you would argue, a better shot at actually capturing the marketplace. And this is all around that store. As the store evolves as a bona fide media channel, validating it in Latin America as we are right now, and now moving that model and capability into the US with, as I think you may have seen recently, with a brand new comprehensive suite of collaborators and co-conspirators. I think we've got a real opportunity there. That's News America. KLA's business was principally stadium business. Well, there is no stadium business right now. It's coming back, and we're of course engaged with them as it comes back. But that there's almost no other market that was hit as hard as that marketplace as people stopped going. Connect is the airport guys that our role with them is to measure digital display in airports, and we're still in ongoing development with them as we perfect our product with them, and we'll look to see that. And that was unexpected. They're in the airport space. That space took a pause for 17 months, especially in the digital ad space. You cannot sell digital display in an airport unless there are people in the airport. So the entire segment took a pause. And then the other one, what I'm really excited about is Sensormatic. Sensormatic, you may have seen a press release from Sensormatic talking about how they're doubling down with visibility. It might have happened in the summertime of last year, if I have my memory correct. That's the brand new creation of a brand new product with them. They landed for the first customer of that product in December of last year. The product isn't even released yet. It'll be released in the first quarter, but we're expecting big things from Sensormatic. It took forever, and these big companies do take forever. It's just the way it is, especially when the price of entry for us in Sensormatic was not them reselling our product as it is, but because they're dominant and they have their own, they suck our product inside their product. They consume our product as a creation of a brand new product. They run that product through its testing processes, and then they release the product. And that's been sort of the last year.
Perfect. All right. And then
I should mention, sorry.
No, go ahead.
That is with, if anyone knows Sensormatic, they know a group within Sensormatic called ShopperTrack. ShopperTrack, and it's important to mention that ShopperTrack does footfall and audience management for retail, clothing, DIY, grocery, etc. So you can imagine that if all you're doing is counting people, that has a certain value. But when you layer in visibility, you're not just counting people now, you're measuring sentiment, you're counting genders, you're counting and measuring age. Now that becomes incredibly more powerful to a retailer. That's probably the best way to describe how we're combining forces.
Perfect. So do you have any prediction on which of your current partnerships or equity stakes will be the biggest driver of revenues about 5 years out?
We think AustinGIS will be our biggest customer within a year. Having said that, it's probably a race for top spot between the Wrinkle Media and on AustinGIS. We say internally that there's no more important execution in the company than Wrinkle Media. So we have a lot of resources and a lot of time spent making sure that that goes flawlessly.
All right. Phoenix EOS, how's the contract going? And are you in talks with any other other companies for EV charging stations?
EV is a really interesting space. We've got a senior executive that's dedicated to that space. We just gave her that mandate a number of weeks ago. Here's the proposition in EV. We know that corporations, retail, and highway infrastructure will be complemented by EV charging. The valuable piece for us is how EV charging will be used to complement retail. The Walmart's going to have 500 parking stalls. 100 of them will be committed to EV charging. The 7-Eleven will have 7 parking stalls. 3 of them will be EV charging. We know from talking to industry executives that EV charging itself is a subsidized platform. It costs a lot of money to deliver EV charging. We also know that from I'm going to flip over to the advertising side now, that you're going to spend 18 to 20 minutes at a location to charge your vehicle. And Penny, when you're at that location, we know who you are because you've made yourself known because you've enrolled into the EV charging system. There's a methodology, there's a payment path, all of that's known. So from an advertising perspective, you're an attractive audience because you have an EV vehicle. That already puts you in an attractive category from a demographic point of view, target market point of view. You have enormous dwell time. You're 15 to 20 minutes. And we know who you are. So we can personalize the data. When you have high dwell time, that increases the value of the media impressions. When you have personalization, that increases the value of the media impressions. When you're co-located with retail, that increases the value of the media impressions. So anything that is displayed on that screen outside the 7-Eleven or Walmart, it'll be available in the store. You got 20 minutes. Why not roll you a promotion while you're there that drives you into the store? And that's the hypothesis, the advertising impressions themselves and driving traffic into the store. You've got time. So we know that when you add digital signage as a complement to EV charging, you flip a non-profitable location to profit. And so this was the hypothesis that we worked on with EOS. They're in deployment right now, and the first marketplace is Atlanta. I think we disclosed that in our earlier press release. And we are doing more of that because what do we have to offer to EV charging? Well, we have computer vision audience measurement. We use our cameras to do that. And we have Vision Capture, which is our content management solution, ad support. It's the same proposition as in Latin America, except it's applied to an EV charging platform. So we think that marketplace, I don't know what the numbers are yet, but we do know from people in the industry, deploy EV charging without digital display, not profitable. Deploy with digital display and ad measurement, profitable. So we know that's pretty good foundation. We'll do more of that. And yes, we're in active discussions with major players, and I'm hopeful that we'll get something done in the first half. And you can imagine, because AustinGIS is an infrastructure as a service company, what is EV charging if not infrastructure? And we can deploy that and finance that with AustinGIS's assistance. 10-year contract, 15-year contract, that sort of thing.
And I think the other element of that is just how much money was in the infrastructure bill for things that fall under AustinGIS's mission. And do you remember what it was? I think it was either 45 or 65 billion
65 billion.
65 billion. Yeah.
That's just in digital divide. The EV piece is separate, which could be a 200 billion. So
Wow.
the digital divide piece is this. We've now come to a place, at least in the G8 and the developed nations, where access to high-speed internet is a human right. We learned that because we all went home during COVID, and the people that didn't have access to high-speed bandwidth didn't get an education, Penny, because they didn't have, they had a notebook computer, but no connectivity, or they might have not had a notebook computer, but they had connectivity. So this idea of expanding high bandwidth internet access into places that currently don't have it as a way of addressing the digital inclusion or digital divide, that's incredibly important. What is AustinGIS but infrastructure as a service? It is precisely that. And on top of that, we can do things that once a network is in place, once high speed bandwidth is in place, plugging cameras into that network for city utility, security, retail analytics, all these are incremental application layers that can sit on top of a deployed network. So it's a win for us, because you can imagine all of the various municipal conversations that we're having right now, the police department applications and conversations we're having right now can rely upon federal funds to deploy the foundation of their network. So not only have we made that clear to them, but we're just now rolling in a lobbyist firm that will help us direct our municipal customers to finding ways to access those federal funds, because it's always myopic, it's always a labyrinth, you know, it's always difficult. So it's critical for us to find that paymaster and to navigate our customers into the paymaster. So we're delighted by it. I think there's a lot that can be done, not just with visibility, but with our partnership ecosystem as well.
Excellent. So, well, that leads me to Phoenix Vision. The contract was announced in November for about 600 or for 600 C-stores. Can you give us a better idea on pricing on that contract or the deployment plan?
Well, I'll talk about deployment plan, but I'm going to keep pricing confidential at the moment. Just it's so much competitive fodder that I don't want to get that out there. You can imagine that it's similar to or north of the AB InBev deal. AB InBev are perhaps the most aggressive negotiator on the planet, and they have a 55,000 store network that they're putting in place. So that would have been our best deal ever, and maybe will be our best deal ever. But the Phoenix Vision deal is really interesting. They're in multiple markets. We're in final stages of deployment planning. Not only do we have their network that exists right now, but a very large C-store ancillary network we're negotiating with, both one onshore here in the US and one offshore. So look for more on that, but that's all there is at the moment.
Okay. Can you give us a better idea of what your rollout with Embera will look like?
So the next step with Embera is to announce or to finalize a commercial agreement with them, and that's sort of being negotiated as we speak. I think you saw the earlier press release that talked about our relationship. We will not only be taking that deal to commercial soon here, we're already swapping red lines, but it will include Embera creating their own product based upon our technology, which is really kind of important. They build custom cooler solutions for various customers. A lot of people might not know that Embera is a wholly owned subsidiary of FEMSA, which is the second largest bottler in the world of Coca-Cola. So you're in the Coca-Cola ecosystem. And so they've built a lot of unique products for Coca-Cola, which of course they think that there's opportunity for. And in addition to that, if you think about the cooler marketplace, there's two broad segments. There's standalone coolers. Embera is the world's largest standalone cooler company. And then there's what they call cold vaults. If you go into a Costco or a Safeway or a Target, you'll see a large cooler infrastructure with multiple doors. The single biggest player there is a company called Hussmann. And it is strategic for us to have a deal with them as well. You got the discrete marketplace, and you've got the what we call a cold vault marketplace. And again, the hypothesis is retrofit. So we're not there building brand new cooler infrastructure and having that connected to a large infrastructure cost. Our objective is to have a deal with the #1 player on the discrete side and the #1 player on the cold vault side. And so that's sort of the part of the strategy of that.
All right. Regarding the new retail consortium announced earlier this week, is that to bring eyes to the store as medium, or do you expect a financial benefit?
That's a really interesting one. And again, the responsibility is mine to sort of decode that. Let me first explain to you what impact the store articulating as a media channel is having. The largest, there are 2 large media companies in the world, not media companies, creative agencies, advertising agencies, for want of a better term, Publicis and WPP, and they're neck and neck. I think WPP is about 52 billion in size, Publicis similar, enormous. And so a good chunk of their revenue comes from media buy. So they would represent Unilever or Procter & Gamble or J&J, and J&J would go to them on a global basis and say, we have social media, we have internet channel, we have direct buy, commercial and television, we have print, we have outdoor media. We've got all these various media channels where we can deliver our message. You go away, WPP, and come back to us with the strategy. That's usually the conversation. And when WPP comes back, they may say, we're going to do 20% in each of these categories. And then a large brand will say, okay, go make it happen. And when WPP does this, they buy the media on behalf of the brand. And that's an enormous piece of their revenue, hundreds of millions, if not billions of dollars, probably billions actually. When we're going into market in Latin America, we're going directly to the brands. We don't go to the agencies. So do you see how we represent an existential threat to the agencies? If they don't get on the wagon as part of this initiative, lead the initiative, then they're going to be left behind, and that will disintermediate them, to use a business school term, put them out of the revenue chain. So they recognize this early, and 2 things will happen from this consortium. One, they'll now be in a thought leadership position, which we helped them get, ironically enough. We taught them this business, and now they're grabbing a hold of it, publishing on it, creating an app around it, all the things they did that you may have seen as part of this release. So they're going to lead it. There's a bunch of constituent companies inside the WPP mix, Smalling Group, Zaxis, Hogarth, various entities inside of the WPP companies that will benefit from the creation of the store as media. Why they want to do it is they want to lead. They don't want to get left behind. And the opportunity for us is to work with the largest advertising agency in the world, so we can go to them and say, we built the network in Europe. It's 10,000 stores. We'd like you to buy 40% off the cup. And that's the kind of relationship that we get. And that conversation, that's our objective for Mexico. We want the large agencies, and of course, the obvious starter is WPP, to buy presence on that network and then resell it to the brands. Now they're in that food chain. You know, they're not outside of it looking in, they're now in the food chain. They represent the channel as one of the media channels that they can sell. So that's the overall strategy. And we've been delighted. We worked on that for 6 months. It's a comprehensive set of thought leadership elements. And the objective is to create momentum with the large retail networks, so that they say, well, it's complex, as we discussed earlier in this conversation. It's so complex. We want to give it to you, and you just figure it out, and we'll take 20% of the revenue.
Okay, perfect. Let's see, Intel tweeted about you this week. Is that a big deal?
Well, for Intel, because they're so conservative, we get 4 times as many no's than yeses from Intel. So for them to take the initiative to talk about us is actually really encouraging. It's rare. And it's rare for everybody. And it's not like we're uniquely underrepresented in the Intel world, but I think they're now beginning to appreciate what a unique position we hold and how we are the keys to their success. When we're successful, we move Intel processors, a lot of them. So I think they're really interested in ensuring that we're successful. And I think even though they don't, they spend a lot of time trying to portend neutrality. I think that we have a special place, and there's more to come from them. We have more engagements with them that they're coming up. So I think we're just going to the next level.
Perfect. Can we expect analyst coverage anytime soon?
Yes, we're working on that now. I can't give you a date. That date is not mine to give, but we have 3 entities that are discussing that with us. And, you know, as long as we can get through their process, which one of them is very advanced, the other 2 are just beginning, we'll get coverage. Yes.
Perfect. So there's been a lot of talk about contracts with beverage companies. Do you have any guess when you'd be able to release PR on those, or when we might see revenue hitting the books?
You know, the funny thing about these 2 beverage orders that we got in the 4th quarter is that they're 79 days to delivery because of supply chain crap. So it'll be after it's deployed, because it's going to be in the public market, right? Yeah. And so their reluctance will diminish after they're deployed. 79 days is a long time, but it could have been worse. And because of that, we're trying to build increased demand so that we can get in front of that 79 days, including when Embera begins to manufacture 100% of the kit here on this continent. We will have that. So that is underway and aggressively being pursued by both entities, Embera and us.
Okay. Excellent. Yeah, it's always a difficult thing when, you know, the financial reports are always a look into the past, and with a business that's growing so quickly, it's hard to actually get that information to shareholders. And I know there's a lot of accounting rules that come in, and but you know, once everything starts hitting the books, I know everyone should be happy.
Well, it's not. Let me address that. So, just look for quarter over quarter significant growth, and you know, because if you wait for the revenue to manifest in the way that I've been talking about it will, and I believe it will, then it's almost too late. You know, and I think we've got significant growth beyond when we start turning the revenue cycle. But you know, if you look at our Q4, which I'm not going to talk about in detail, but a mammoth quarter based upon the previous quarters in terms of growth, and we don't see that slowing down. I mean, we're a SaaS, which means we're 1, 2, 4, 8, 16, right? So it's important that I do my best to communicate that. Now that's mitigated slightly with the mix of hardware that's now part of our sales solution, but it's small, right? The rest of the business is annual recurring revenue. So as long as that continues to grow, can you hear my dog going crazy in the background?
Sorry. I can. That's sorry. Okay. I don't know where mine is. She'd normally like to join along too. So
he's a COVID puppy. So, you know, anyway, the point is that that's what we have to track. And what I have to highlight is we're growing the annual recurring revenue quarter over quarter. Track for that. We're looking at 100% to 150%, 200% growth per quarter. And that should be what people need to see. Yes, it is rear view mirror, but it is an indicator, I think, of where the company is going. Is it executing against plan?
Perfect. All right. Well, in light of the recent trading activity, do you have any plans to accelerate your cross list to TSX?
We have made no indications that we would cross list to TSX. I've yet to hear a cogent argument that would suggest that makes sense. I think the listing conversation that we have been having is the one around NASDAQ, which I'll give you my quick opinion on that. We will go to NASDAQ. It's where I want to be. I'm a tech CEO. That's home field. But we're not going to go there through some sort of weird reverse mechanism. We're going to go there organically, which means we're going to have to take our time. Regarding the CSE, I've heard people say that it's not the best place to be as a tech company. I hear it, but I've yet to find the argument. I've yet to dig into the real reasons why that's not the place for us. I'm anxious to hear it, and a cross listing could be slam dunk. My last company that I was public company CEO was a TSX big board company. So I understand how the TSX works, and I know it functions, you know, equally well as the CSE, and in many cases better than the CSE. But I want to understand what's really in it for the shareholders if we were to go through that expense, effort, and energy? And I haven't heard the answer. I'm open to it, but I haven't heard it.
Well, I'm pretty sure after this, you'll hear lots of
I would love
lots of opinions. I personally, as an American, am so excited for the future when you are on the NASDAQ. I mean, there's so much money held in retirement accounts that just can't play they can't play in Canadian small caps. And you know, it's sad. So I'm excited. You know, this visibility is my largest holding, but I would like it to become my largest holding. So yeah, I welcome you to the NASDAQ whenever you're ready.
Okay.
But I do appreciate not, you know, going through, you know, a big orchestrated process to make it happen early. I don't think that ever works out well. Let's see. So, you know, there's about a news release every other week, it seems, with another major contract. With so many contracts, what are you doing to ensure execution?
Oh man, that's the principal focus of the company. I would say we now have a ratio of about 60% of the headcount focused on execution. Which means that I mean, just this week we said no to 3 deals, because unless we're comfortable we can execute 100%, and shareholders hate to hear that, but I'm telling you that's the right decision, because we have so much in front of us now that just executing on what's available to us right now, flawlessly executing, gets us to the promised land. So adding to that just diminishes the likelihood of success across the board. So the only potential for that to be mitigated or modified, that approach, is if our channels step up in a way that they can take the deal from us. We step back into a supply only of SaaS, and you know, life's good. And the market's not there yet. We have to be a player coach. We have to be involved in the game. We have to score the odd goal. It's just how we have to function right now. Over time, as the marketplace gets more and more knowledgeable, and as we engage in that ongoing knowledge transfer between us and our principal channels, you know, we're going to have to really modify the level of commitment we make in the marketplace. WestRock is an example. The level of engagement they had in 2019, we are now at a place where their level of engagement would be 50 times that. You know, we are right at the top of the organization. We're speaking strategically about deals. There's 7 to 10 deals in the pipeline with just WestRock right now. I'm not suggesting 100% of those deals will manifest or even optimize, but the point is they're working along that trajectory, getting to the point where they have skills internally that we can sort of let go slowly, like a parent teaching a kid how to ride a bike. You know, that's where we're at. And anybody that's interested in having me go into that level of detail, when I do that, people understand that it does take time. WestRock's a paper company that's trying to turn into a digital company. So you can imagine that that's probably the worst example of having to do that knowledge transfer.
Yeah. All right. Well, okay, here's my final question for you.
Okay.
What catalysts do you expect in the next 60 to 90 days?
I think we'll see some territorial expansion, some offshore momentum, not only distribution deals, but you know, deals within country. And we got a couple of really strategic ones that we're looking at right now. I talked about that sovereign government deal. I've talked about a very large deal with a telecom provider that will be hopefully coming out with in the first half of this year, maybe even the first quarter of this year. But all those take an enormous amount of time. We don't deal with, you know, $40 million companies that can make decisions, you know, like we make decisions. We have bureaucratic large organizations that take their time, and I appreciate that frustrates the shareholders. Hell, it frustrates me. But that's the game we're in. That's the game we're playing at the moment. So in addition to that, I think you'll see some base hits, some important revenue deals that we'll be talking about in the US retail space soon, this quarter.
All right, perfect. Well, as always, it's a pleasure talking with you. Any last things you need to add?
No, thank you for an hour of your time. And I like the opportunity of talking with basically no agenda, just going through the business and speaking about why the current behavior in the marketplace isn't a long-term indicator of who the company is and how well we're doing. And I know that I say that with some sort of serial regularity, but it's what I believe.
Well, I pick my stocks carefully, and I find visibility to be a treasure. So thank
Wonderful.
you for taking the time.
Thank you for your support, Penny.
Have a great day.